The world is unpredictable, and the challenge is a fact of life. Every day, new issues come up. The question is, how does one respond to those issues? And also, sometimes you need to look towards the future and try to foresee the developments and to say, how do I ensure that if these issues emerge, I'll be able to maintain the position that I have and safeguard my interests. Now, when we look at these geopolitical issues, since 2021, I've been sending a message to Africans, even the policymakers, that the era of aid as we know it today is coming to an end. And the reality before us is that some countries are now more or less doing away with institutions that were designed to channel aid. And other countries, we had a meeting of the Development Committee of the World Bank and the Commissioner for International Partnerships at the EU more or less said what I said, that aid as we know it has come to an end. Therefore, the answer is, how do we position ourselves to ensure that we are able to emerge out of it? So the question of domestic resources mobilization has been at the forefront, and we have working with the member states to ensure that, as indicated, they increase tax collections, they broaden the tax base, they digitalize, and they also eliminate illicit financial flows going outside Africa. And some of the countries, as indicated here, are doing quite well, but others have not yet been able to do it. That is the first point. The second point is that the issue of economic integration comes into play, very much so. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a good start, but we need to go beyond it because there is trade deflection in the free trade area. The best way to safeguard that is to come up with a common external tariff. So you need to move towards a customs union / common market. And we did come up with the readiness assessment towards an African customs union / common market. The ministers responsible for integration across Africa are looking at that document. So when we have that document, we're going to have a single trade policy for Africa, which is very, very, very good. And related to that is a question of macroeconomic convergence. When you look at the growth rates across Africa, they are not uniform.
Well, Ambassador Muchanga, let me just jump in here, particularly with regards to the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Okay.
For a lot of observers who may not be fully integrated into the work of the African Union, we've been talking about Africa's integration for ages.
Yes.
But it's still not yet Uhuru.
Yes,
we're doing much more business with the rest of the world.
Yes.
We're sitting on an abundance of resources, but yet we just seem to be moving marginally. What can we do to accelerate the integration of our markets and trade, as well as adding value across borders? I think that's one of the critical issues of our time right now. Just help us understand.
Yes,
first
and foremost, we have created the African Continental Free Trade Area, a market space for trading.
Absolutely.
The challenge now comes to the business sector to respond. And in my statements, I've always said, since we established the African Continental Free Trade Area, I've never had a business person across Africa welcoming the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area to say, we are happy that you have established this market, and since it's a large market, we are going to invest so much in this market. And I always challenge the business people, come out of hiding, invest in the market, invest in manufacturing of both final goods and intermediate goods. So the response from the private sector has not been very encouraging.
But shouldn't the enabling environment and the policies drive that first. And the reason why I ask this is today we're a population of 1.2 billion, 2030, well, 2050, it'll be 2.4 billion. If we don't integrate the market now, the question is when?
Well, some time back there was a study by the African Export-Import Bank which said the stock of infrastructure that we have right now in Africa is capable of increasing intra-African trade. I've forgotten the figure, but relatively large figure. So we are underutilizing the current stock of infrastructure. We need to do more. Because what I would expect the business houses from Africa is to come up with the logistics centers across Africa, warehouses across Africa. I would also expect the shipping company, the private sector from Africa, the private sector from Africa, to start planning of coming up with any African shipping line. My dream is that one day we are going to have ships moving across Africa, both ways, delivering goods and taking them inland. Right now, what we have is a situation where we depend on ships owned by foreigners to ship goods from Africa to the next African country. And before they come to Africa, they have to go to Amsterdam and other places. So it comes back to the issue of the business. We are sitting on potential. The business sector has not really fully responded. Now, that also brings in another dimension. And before I answer directly, let me congratulate the Minister of Finance for Ethiopia to establish the stock exchange. But however, I would like to warn you that in quite a number of African countries, they established stock exchanges, and the initial number of companies that listed on those stock exchanges, as of today, this is still the same number. It has not increased. Now, why is that so? Because our enterprises, most of them, do not grow into big enterprises. They cannot afford to list on the stock markets. Now, when you do that, you come up with bigger enterprises, and they have the capacity now to undertake large-scale investments, such as coming up with the logistics centers, warehouses, and also the shipping centers, and even freight companies to move goods across the continent. So the challenge is the private sector. Now, when you look at the challenge of the private sector, if you Google right now, you Google Africa Wealth Report 2024. What you'll find there is that the aggregate investable wealth of the African billionaires, centimillionaires, and the ordinary millionaires is $2.5 trillion. They are not investing that money because they don't see any opportunities. Okay. So why is the problem?
So Ambassador, it does seem to me, therefore, that there's an opportunity for a convergence between the African Union, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the African Development Bank, other development partners, and the private sector, a major convening to move this forward. As you said, even in terms of logistics, moving a container of goods from Dubai or China to Africa costs much less than it does shipping the same volume of goods from Ghana to Nigeria and vice versa. So in terms of the value chains that need to be developed, the logistics, as well as the increasing role that AI is going to play, what can we do? You've talked about some of this, but rather than wait for the private sector, can we have a convening as quickly as possible with all the major stakeholders coming to the table to move us to the next level?
Well, the African Development Bank already has a platform, the African Investment Platform. Then the question is...
Which is business-based, but we're talking about the convergence of policies.
Okay, I'll come to that. Yes, they are doing very well. Now, within the margins of this ongoing assembly of the African Union, I think either on the 15th or on the 16th, we are going to bring together the Pan-African financial institutions and African business people.
Fantastic.
And the question is, what do you want us to do for you to unlock your investments? Let's hope they'll respond. But as we ask that question, the business people always challenge them to say, on your own, ask yourself, what can I do to contribute to the progress of my continent? It's two ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not just a question of incentives. They should also try to look for opportunities and seize them. And when they see the opportunity, they say, we are going to take advantage of that. Absolutely. Now, back to the issue of growth of big businesses. The World Bank, I don't know which, one of the economist intelligence unit, they came up with a report around December. Their assessment was that the problem with most of the African businesses is that there are so many small-scale enterprises.
True.
And most of them do not grow into big enterprises. So we needed to create conditions where they can grow. And it's a question of also the businesses also creating the conditions where they can grow. And I always give the example of a Chinese company, SANY, Sunny. 34 years ago, it was a small metal fabricator. And when it established its basic strategy was that we should invest 5% of gross revenue every year into innovation and research and development. And they were very disciplined. They did that. They used that money to go around the world to buy small enterprises as a source of transfer technology. Today, it's a multinational company operating in Africa and other parts of the world. That's the challenge that we give African entrepreneurs to say, come out and say, how can I contribute under the present conditions to the progress of my continent?
Thank you.
But before I leave, let me indicate that the issue of reform of the global financial architecture came into the picture. The African Union now is a permanent member of the G20. Absolutely. And we are very much seized with the situation. We are dealing with it in the G20. And to ensure that we come up with the policy-based and policy-driven proposals in this issue and several others, we decided to create African Union-level knowledge partners. And the African Development Bank is one of our knowledge partners. So we'll be working together to ensure that we drive the process of reform of the global financial architecture from an African point of view. Thank you.